All right, we're recording.
All right, so this is the October 18th Cloud Provider Working Group meeting. Looks like a light group this week, so we'll just give a quick update and follow up from the Slack channel. I'll take some notes and post them.
Okay. Josh, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Not have much from our side. Identified the out-of-tree provider issue yesterday with the 1.8 release. Seems that fix went in without being reviewed by, with that, I guess, in mind. It was with entry in mind. And then that was landed and going to make it into 1.2. And then I'm working on the finalizer PR and a refactor of the service account controller just to kind of clean up some of the files and the concurrency issue in the service account controller. So all the tickets that I've made so far, I'm working on this week. I'm hoping to have them ready by end of week. It might be next week though.
Cool. And do you know if Andrew is working on the reversing the data flow and kubelet issue?
He said, I haven't talked to him about it. I've only seen what he said in Slack.
Okay. All right. I think he's joining now. He's not here yet. So I added a doc for just as a central point of reference for the concepts behind the Cloud Controller Manager, how it, what it does, what are the controllers in it, and why it has the permission, why it has the access that it has.
Wait. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we should record this.
I'm already recording.
Oh, sorry, it was so small. Sorry. Yeah.
So yeah, I added that doc. I think Cole from CoreOS suggested that I also talk about initializers. I figured I'd wait until Josh's finalizers are also in before I write about it, so that I could also include that topic in there. So that's where I'm at.
Can you post a link to that doc in the chat, please, Sid?
Yeah, absolutely. There. And the other thing that I'm working on is I've added CCM support in COPS. It's an open PR. There are a few comments, but I think it'll go through soon.
Sorry, you added what to COPS?
CCM support in COPS, so just the ability to deploy the cloud via CCM instead of the usual way. The Cloud Controller Manager instead of the usual way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the pull request is still open, but I suspect it's going to go through.
And can you drop a
link to that? Yeah.
Link to that as well.
I'll review that now. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Lucas.
And Josh, is there a PR work you're working on or an issue?
Sorry, someone said something. What'd you ask?
I was asking if there's a PR open for the finalizers work that you're doing.
I haven't opened the PR yet. I'm still working on it locally. There is an issue. I can post the links if you want.
Okay, that would be great. We can just drop it into the chat. I'll put it in the notes. I haven't found our ongoing notes. Lucas, if you have a link to that, that would be helpful too.
Yeah, let me dig it up.
Thanks. Okay. Keep my machine pointed at myself so I can continue to take notes.
Sure. So I dropped a quick note to Sid, but just so everyone else is aware, I had been working on attempting to separate Node Manager into two pieces. sort of good news, bad news on that one. I was able to successfully do it, but it didn't actually help. Generally, the two pieces are lifecycle management and CIDR control, and both of them still required access to the cloud to be able to function properly. So right now, I'm playing with the ability to just run the entire node controller in either the CCM or the KCM. So I've got some pretty good headway there. I'm just ensuring that it does actually successfully for GCE before I try and take that PR out of work in progress status.
So if we run the node controller in the CCM,
Yep.
will persistent volumes, like GC persistent disk, work? I presume not.
Not sure I understand the problem.
So I thought that if what I meant was the attach-detach controller. Sorry.
Oh yeah. So the attach-detach stuff is still firmly. There's a volume controller doc that I sent out last week. Yeah, the volume controller needs right now still only can run in the KCM, and yeah, we're still not anywhere where we can actually pull the volume controller out of the KCM. Although I did have some suggestions on how it might be done in that doc. I haven't actually started making any actual code changes towards getting that to work.
Okay, yeah. I think regarding node control, as you said, I think it should be run totally in the CCM.
So the change I have is essentially to allow it to run entirely in the CCM. But obviously, I believe people like Rancher are likely to not want to run the CCM at all, since they don't need anything cloud specific. So right now I have it set up to run in either at the cloud provider's call which one it runs in.
Well, couldn't we make the controllers to run somehow conditional, like opt-in or something for code consumers?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what I have. I have it as a flag so that you can decide where it runs. Do you run it in the KCM or do you run it in the CCM?
Or not at all, right?
If you really don't want a node controller, sure.
Yeah.
It should be an exactly one, right?
That would be nice. That's actually a good point. Right now, there's no easy way to, since it's all done by flag on the controllers themselves, whether it runs there. There's no real way right now to ensure that it runs in only one. But there's a piece of work being done by another team to do config control, which is essentially like having a config file, a common config file that you'd pull down from the CAS. I can see if that's ready to be shared or not, but with the use of that, we might actually be able to get to it only runs in one.
So is that something like component config for the CCM?
Sure, yes. That's the term I was trying to remember. Yeah, the component config. Thank you. So with component config, I think we could get down to actually being able to guarantee it runs in exactly one. But there's a chunk of work that needs to be done to actually pull in component config.
In the meantime, can we ensure that we bubble up an easily discoverable error message if it doesn't start somewhere in some amount of time?
I can look at doing that.
I mean, there's the best solution, and there's we're working on it. At least you know what went wrong when it went wrong.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we can certainly look at doing that.
Is this idea that not all cloud providers would want to run all controllers in the CCM something that we are going to run into more often? Does it make sense to kind of do gating or flags on the CCM to say run these controllers?
I think the problem is not that cloud providers don't want to run something in the cloud controller manager. The problem is that there are Kubernetes providers who are not on a cloud and don't have a CCM.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like if you're running it on a bunch of Raspberry Pis or on bare metal, that's not a meaningful concept or component.
Right.
And even, I mean, we haven't yet gotten to the point of talking about what the Kubernetes core is going to look like. But for purposes of running like E2E tests and for Kubernetes compliance, it's not even clear when we get to stage 2 whether there would be a CCM available to Kubernetes core.
So on that topic, I think I see the CCM in core as a generic library more than something that can be E2E tested. It's more like unit, maybe integration tests. But I do think we should, once we get to the point that we can say the CCM is beta, we need continuously running E2E tests from the different providers. So like DigitalOcean will make their E2E test running on DigitalOcean with the CCM. They'll continuously upload results to the test grid. I can link to the project of mine that explains how you could do that pretty easily. And on top of KubeADM, probably. And then it's basically not maybe release blocker, but at least significant signal for the release. Is the CCM ready if we have like 9 providers and all tests are failing, or are we have 10 providers and all are green? So that will give us some kind of signal at least. Is this thing okay or is it not?
So I think what you said, just to repeat it back, is that we need in this group to focus on the unit and integration tests for the cloud controller manager. That's necessary but not sufficient. And to get to sufficient, we need other cloud providers to upload data so there's some signal in test grid for multiple cloud providers. Did I capture that correctly?
Yes. So
I agree with all that. The other thing I heard was that you have an idea of how to make that work.
Yeah, so I made this small project, github.com looks as Kate's federated tests. That gives you a brief walkthrough of how you could run a bash loop that runs KubeADM init, spins up something, runs E2E tests, and tears the cluster down and uploads the results. The important, I mean, that's just a proof of concept. The important part there is the API of the uploaded results. So with that project, you'll easily see what do I need to upload for it to show up in the test grid? What is the directive structure, etc. And a simple implementation kind of dummy.
So I think this is really closely related to what I expect to be a pattern for cloud providers in the conformance working group, that they will also want continuous integration to ensure that there are no new conformance tests, that either errors in the tests that need to be fixed or something gets mucked up in the cloud provider code itself. And so I wonder if we could combine those efforts somehow. There are some tools. Heptio has led the way on some of the tooling, and I think it would be very useful to optionally allow the cloud providers to upload that to test grid, just so that it shows up on the release team leads radar early in the process. So maybe we could combine those efforts and solve both of those issues at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm somewhat talking to SIG testing I mean, right now it's my thing is a bash script, just so it's
Sure.
well, not easily readable, but next to.
Yeah. So what we had talked about was just providing a container that has Sonobui in it and runs the tests, and so really it's just about pulling the repo and doing that on some reasonable cadence. And then allowing a cloud provider to deploy that into a cluster of their choosing, and wiring it up to test grid is the piece I wasn't clear anyone had thought through. So
yeah, but that's in the project, like what you need, what files you need, and what spec API to use for things to show up in the test grid. That's in that project.
Is this for new end-to-end tests? Don't we already have end-to-end test coverage of several cloud provider features? Like there's Azure end-to-end disk tests, for example. Are we talking about migrating those and making them, moving them out of core and making cloud providers responsible for running them?
Yeah, I think when we start talking about stage 2, my interpretation of the stage 2 goals is to get all of the, Azure, Google, Amazon code out of Kubernetes core. And toward that end, I think then we start needing to do things like running all those end-to-end specific, those provider-specific end-to-end tests somewhere else.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the risk I think we're trying to avoid is, so far to date, we have had this sort of monolithic Kubernetes deployment where all of the cloud providers that are supported are compiled into the same binaries. And now we're moving to a world where some change internally could inadvertently break some other cloud provider. And I would expect that engineers working on one cloud are not terribly cognizant of what's happening as a result of that in another cloud. And this would allow us to surface those issues early on and take note. It is going to be a more challenging world that we're moving into, but I think it's necessary. But we have to put some effort into the tooling and support for that, so that we don't end up in difficult situations.
Sure, that makes sense. I guess I'm asking more what the delta is between today and that future, seeing as we already run those tests on PRs. Like those tests are already run against at least a certain set of the cloud providers per PR. So are we talking about just preserving that and making sure that they're still running against the CCM model as well? Or are we talking about a shorter term migration of those tests out of core too?
So I think we're talking both about like running, instead of using the in-tree cloud provider when executing these per PR EDU tests, we should run with the CCM, a cluster with a CCM instead of an in-tree cloud provider, and running EDU, the EDU test themselves would run from a binary that is not compiled in EDU test for a specific cloud provider. Right. So, but
that makes sense. And then that helps clarify that they're kind of two separate things to split out the actual test code itself as well as infra for it. Okay.
Lucas, would you mind writing up a quick paragraph on that and just posting to the mailing list, for example? I just want to capture kind of the trending direction there so that it doesn't surprise folks later on. And
I'll add that to my list.
Thank you.
Then, what else popped up this week? Well, we tried to deprecate the cloud provider flag in the API server and got some resistance. Anyone check that out?
It's on my list, but I have to admit I hadn't looked at it yet.
I don't know the result of it. I did ping Daniel and Walter the issue to keep an eye on because I think it's us that it impacts. So it doesn't surprise me that there's some resistance to that. Again, it's really just about time and resources, and I fully support the direction. We'll get to it for sure, and I haven't followed up with Daniel about that. He's just back from paternity leave, so.
Oh yeah. So, well, we have two issues and debate points, and one is the author. What is in author right now, and the KMS for Vault and Google integration. So, I think, that's one, and the other one is the node dialer, which we have talked about here before. Right. My interpretation was that the node dialer is not required anymore, as we have RBAC at GA level. So I don't see, Ded said that there's no replacement, but from what I see, there is a replacement. Or?
I hear what you're saying. I think if it were built today, we wouldn't need the dialer. The thing is that things have been built in the past, and it doesn't require a migration of a currently installed base. It's like the old saying, God created the world in 7 days because there was no install base. So we do have to deal with that situation. And it takes time just to plan and figure out how to roll forward and roll back. And it's not the steady state that's the challenging part. It's how to move people who are already using something.
Yeah, but then I don't get the argument that we can't deprecate this because we don't have any forward-looking plan, because we do have a forward. So
yeah, with that I agree, but I may be missing details. My understanding right now is that if we were to build it today, we could have done it in a different way, and that we are the only ones who depend on the dialer for previously existing customers. So let me validate that, and if that's true, then I don't have any issue with deprecating and figuring out how to phase it out and remove the code later. But again, Daniel's back, but I haven't even seen him yet. So
okay, yeah, please.
He's the one who voiced the concern, right?
Yeah, so it was David Eads and Jordan who brought up some concerns.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, they may have other. Again, they may have other concerns about OpenShift, for example, maybe using it for something that I am not aware of.
I don't think so, but yeah, please sync with Daniel and we'll see. Do we have a specific issue for this yet?
I saw there was a PR, an issue. Let me see if I can find it.
I meant for the deprecating. Or actually, for phasing out the node dialer or something like that, or for. So we could capture right now. It all happened under DIMS. Cloud API service shouldn't be be dependent on cloud provider, and that turned out to have a lot of various other discussions.
Yeah, Again, I think we're going to discover tricky ones like this. I think we should, rather than be surprised when they come up, I think we should just understand that there are a lot of moving pieces and try to recognize the patterns. And I think the pattern here might be there is a path forward for new users. And I think your argument is if that's true, then we shouldn't encourage people to continue to use the dialer, for example, if there's a better way that we intend to support for longer. So again, I don't have all the information. I think it's a valid point, but I don't think we have the people who expressed the concerns in this meeting. So let's flag it for follow-up and move along if there's anything else. I dropped the link to the GitHub issue in the chat if anyone following along at home was missing that. And just updating notes. Anybody have other icebergs issues to talk about? Did we not get an update from anyone on the call?
Did we discuss the kubelet getting the right certs, reversing the data flow there? Was it Andrew or who's going to work on it? And like, just so we have spelled it out exactly what we're trying to do. Oh, I see we have 2 minutes left. Okay, but
yeah. So I am looking into it. It seems like it'll be a really long task, to be honest, because we're not just changing the kubelet. Like we'd have to change some API server stuff too, right? Yeah, so I did pretty much that's as far as I went, just trying to see like how much code we're going to be touching for this. I will try to make a follow-up. I'll send an email out to our mailing group just to kind of outline like what my plan for that is, and then go from there. Because we're running out of time, so I don't want to blab on for 10 minutes.
Okay, yeah, I guess you'll follow up with questions, if any, in the Slack channel.
And just to follow up, I saw a note in the chat. My understanding is that the node dialer is just a mechanism for masters and nodes that are not on the same subnet to talk to each other. GKE does use this functionality, and it's not clear to me. It sounded like there was some pushback from Red Hat as well, so maybe OpenShift is using that functionality as well. So just want to make the point that it is unclear who's dependent on this, at least GKE is.
Yeah, I looked at the comments now, and it seems to do more than what we thought, right? That it does more than just securing the communication from master to node. And then I understand David's point. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're out of time. Thanks everybody for taking the time today, and I will put the notes in the central doc.
Cool. Thanks.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Bye.